Now, if you don't recognize who that is, you are listening to the wrong show. We just heard the Righteous Brothers right here on the Vintage Rock and Pop Shop, a song called On This Side of Goodbye, and we're so thrilled today that Bill Medley is joining us to talk about his new autobiography, The Time of My Life. He's also got some new music, too. Bill, thanks so much for joining us, and I would assume that over the years you've probably been asked to write your autobiography, but why now?
Well, I'll tell you, Bobby passed away in 2003, and my family and friends said, you better sit down and write down all these stories and all the stuff that's happened with you and Bobby and this and that while you can still remember it. and I started it, and I kind of got bored of hearing about Bill Medley, and so I put it away, and then Mike Marino, a great writer, had called me and said, listen, I'd like to do a book. And I said, well, come and do a chapter. And this was only about a year and a half ago. And
right.
And if I like it, we'll go forward. And he did a chapter, and I thought it was great because he recorded me telling the stories, and then he'd go home and write it out. So it really sounds like me telling the stories.
Well, it's a great book. There are a lot of laughs in it and also some very revealing moments. And in a way, as much as it's about your career, it almost functions as a history of show business.
Well, yeah, I kind of wanted it to be about two or three things. I wanted it to be, first off, about Bill Medley, and I wanted it to be about the Righteous Brothers, and I wanted it to be about the era, that we came up in. So hopefully I hit those points.
Something you write about in the book that I found really fascinating, we all have this image of Phil Spector as the taskmaster in the studio. He had to have complete control, and yet he would let you produce records.
Yeah, back there in 63, 64, 65, we would spend about maybe an hour and a half to record a song, and they would cost, I wouldn't know now, but let's say $300, $500. Well, he would take 2 days. He took 2 or 3 days to record Lovin' Feelin', and it probably cost a couple of $1,000. So he didn't have time to do the albums, and it would have cost too much. So he said, I'll do the singles, and you produce the albums, because I produced the earlier albums, when we had hits with Little Latin Loopy-Loo and My Babe, kind of rock and roll albums, and it was phenomenal. I mean, to be able to sit in the studio with Phil while he was producing You've Lost That Lovin' Feelin' was very magical, because he wouldn't let anybody in the studio. He didn't want anybody to know how he was doing what he was doing. And it was just, I was like a little sponge. So I produced Soul and Inspiration. We had left Phil, and Soul and Inspiration was supposed to be our follow-up to Lovin' Feelin', and we started working on it, and then something happened where I think Phil Spector and Barry Mann and Cynthia Weil, who wrote Lovin' Feelin', got into a disagreement. So the minute we left Phil, I called Barry and Cynthia and said, please send me that song. And they did. So when I produced Soul and Inspiration, I just pretty much did what I thought Phil would have done.
We're talking to Bill Medley of the Righteous Brothers, our guest today on the Vintage Rock and Pop Shop. His new book is called The Time of My Life, and he has a new record out as well, which we'll talk about in just a second. But we just heard the Bill Medley produced You're My Soul and Inspiration, and it sounds like a seamless transition from the Spector sound.
Well, it was a #1 hit, and so I guess all that worked out fine. I truly believe as an artist, I think Phil would have made a better record, but it went to #1, so it worked.
One of my favorite chapters in the book was the chapter about Elvis.
Ah.
And I've interviewed a lot of people that have worked with Elvis over the years, and everybody says, pretty much the same thing. He was a nice guy, very polite. I never spoke with someone who was actually friends with Elvis, and he didn't have too many friends, close friends.
No, he didn't, because he was way overprotected, and I don't know if that was through Colonel Parker or through his Memphis friends, or if it was just his insecurities. I don't know, but he really stayed to himself. I can remember Connie Stevens and I tried to get him to go to dinner with us, and he was going to go. We were all in Vegas at the same time, and he was very comfortable with us. I think he dated Connie a couple of times and knew her pretty well and knew me real well. So, but at the last minute, he said, no, I can't do it. I can't go out. So he had himself convinced that he couldn't go out, and maybe it was true. I mean, God, he was Elvis Presley. He certainly would attract a lot of attention.
Yeah, he'd draw a crowd, yeah.
Yeah, a little bit.
How did you feel when he was performing Love and Feeling on stage?
You know what? I thought his version of Love and Feeling was one of the best versions that I heard. Of course, he has a baritone voice, a little like mine, so I thought it was a pretty natural record, and he, with the sweet inspirations doing Bobby's part, and it was kind of gospel-like, and I thought it was a very cool version.
You're trying hard.
Your autobiography is called The Time of My Life, obviously a reference to the hit single with Jennifer Warnes, I've Had the Time of My Life, from the Dirty Dancing movie. And from what I understand, when you first heard this song, which eventually went on to be one of the most popular songs in history, you weren't thrilled with it at first.
Well, it wasn't. Yeah, I wasn't that thrilled with it. I was going to babble around it, but they sent me a demo of it, and for some reason it was these two guys that sang real high, and so I just kind of didn't hear it, for me, and so I turned it down for about 3 months. Not necessarily because of the song, but my wife Paula was expecting our daughter, and I promised her I would be home for the birth, but they wanted me to go from California and record it in New York. I said, I just can't do it and won't do it. But they stayed after me. Jimmy Einer from New York would call me every week.
Right.
We still want you. You're the voice for Patrick Swayze. And Paula, my wife, had our daughter, McKenna, and they called and said, Jennifer Warnes wants to do the song with you if she can do it with you. And I love Jennifer Warnes, and I think she just had that great hit with Joe Cocker,
right,
Up Where We Belong. So I thought, wow, I think maybe that could be a good marriage. But we actually just went into the studio to do it, to sing together, to work together. We didn't think the song was going to be a hit. We didn't think the movie was going to be a hit. We thought it was a good song, a great record. They made a great record. But we didn't think it was going to be a hit without the movie being a hit. And against all odds, the little movie just became a monster. And I mean, a monster overnight. And the song I've Had the Time of My Life went number one all over the world in about 2 or 3 weeks. So it was, one of the, thank God. Thank God God was involved.
We're talking to Bill Medley today on the Vintage Rock and Pop Shop. And, the Righteous Brothers enjoyed a resurgence in the late 80s, early 90s, when songs such as Unchained Melody, which was used in the film Ghost, wound up in movies.
Yeah, the first one to come out, I think in about 87 or something like that, or maybe earlier, was Top Gun, had Love and Feeling in it. If they would have re-released it, it would have been a number one hit record in 86 or 87. And then I had the hit with A Time of My Life, which was just a monster. And then the next year, they put Unchained Melody and Ghost, and it just became bigger than anything. And so we were just, in 1990, we were back.
Yeah.
You know, those three records were monsters. And, you know, Love and Feeling is still the most played record in the history of American radio, which is so odd to wrap my brain around that. But so back in 1990, we were back. We were huge.
Well, you know, romance never goes out of style.
Boy, isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
Thank God for a thing called love.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, a couple of things I want to get to before we let you go here. We've talked about some great successes you've had in your career, but you've also turned down some songs.
Yeah, I've turned down about three different careers. Yeah, but you know, here comes my cop out. When you're real hot, all the great writers are writing a song for you and trying to get you to record it. So you're just bound to turn down some great songs, and I turned down We Gotta Get Out of This Place, and that was written by Barry and Cynthia, and God, He Ain't Heavy as My Brother, and just a million In the Ghetto, that Elvis ended up recording, and I've always said he needed a break at the time.
Well, you're still recording. In fact, you have a new record, Your Heart to Mine.
Yeah, I have a brand new band, and it's just one of the favorite albums or CDs that I've ever done. It's dedicated. It's actually dedicated to the blues, but it's dedicated to all the guys the black performers that I was so heavily influenced by in the 50s. You know, Ray Charles, B.B. King,
Sure.
Sam Cooke, just all these great singers. And so I always wanted to do this album to pay tribute to them. So I thought I'd better do it while I have the chance.
Well, it turned out great. We're going to hear something from it
wonderful.
in just a bit. But again, the book is The Time of My Life. We've been chatting with Bill Medley here. Thank you so much for spending some time chatting with us.
Absolutely my pleasure.